right. All right. Hello, everybody. This is the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. As always, Ed Carbajal here with Matthew Hawkins. Brought to you by All Access MMA. This week's guest is an OG from the MMA news game, Hunter Homeboy Homistek, he who walks behind the rows, and I don't know how many other nicknames you picked up along the years. But welcome to the podcast, Hunter.
Thanks for having me, dude. It's been a long time in the making. Feels really good to be back. And I'm partial to the Malachi references. You know, you coined that on your own. That was good stuff. Those will stick the best.
So Hunter, this is the first time we've spoken, met, but I do recognize you obviously from MMA Twitter, and you've had a lot of interactions with a lot of the same people I do on Twitter over the last several years. For fans that don't really know kind of your history, why don't you, without getting too crazy, why don't you tell us how you kind of got involved in the MMA world a little bit, at least for the MMA fans? And I know you started working, I believe, for the Pittsburgh Pirates and some baseball stuff. Why don't you just give us a quick little breakdown of how you got where you're at?
For sure, man. So in college, I graduated with a degree in journalism. So I was working for the school's newspaper, was the arts and entertainment editor there, WVU, West Virginia University. Around my senior year, I started working for Bleacher Report for their MMA section, actually. I always visited Bleacher Report MMA, like newbies getting into the sport, love the list, love like the fun little articles that Bleacher Report does. So I was always there. And one day they just had an ad on the side that was like, interested in writing for us, apply now. So I was like, yeah, sure. Journalism student seems like a good way to get in. So I got in there, started writing, kind of worked my way up their ladder till I was eventually kind of covering events and things like that for them. Then I went from there to MMAfighting.com, from there to flowcombat.com. So then I ran Flow Combat with one of my best friends ever, my mentor, Dwayne Finley. We ran Flow Combat for a couple years. Then I went from there and got the opportunity to come back home. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So there was a website, dkpittsburghsports.com, fully credentialed. They cover the Steelers, Pirates, Penguins, University of Pittsburgh. I got the opportunity to work for them, and man, I've always been a huge Steelers fan, huge Pittsburgh boy at heart. I was like, man, this opportunity is too cool, right at home. I knew MMA would always be there, if I wanted to come back, and I still followed along a little bit. It's not the same, as you guys know. When you're not constantly working in the game, man, you fall behind quick. Like I was just teasing you guys off camera. I was like, let's please not talk about this upcoming card too deep, because I don't know some of these names. I'll be honest with you. I don't know some of these fighters anymore, but I got that opportunity, man, to cover the Steelers, Pirates, and University of Pitt basketball. Just couldn't pass it up, and it was an awesome opportunity. And that led me now. I just started my own site about 3 weeks ago, so I branched off. I've always wanted to do my own thing, man. From the jump, I've wanted to build my brand and do my own thing. COVID finally gave me that opportunity, the time I needed, to just sit back and really work on my own stuff. So I took it. Now I got my own site, homistek.com. I already got a couple clients there. We're rolling there. It's fun, man. It's digital marketing, social media, SEO, things like that. Help you out with writing blog posts, obviously, content creation, pretty much anything you need. I'm there to help you out and just keep building this thing on my own, man. And it's also given me the chance to dabble in MMA a little bit again. So that's really fun, man.
Yeah, I brought up the site for folks to see it that are watching the video portion of the podcast. I mean, it's for somebody doing something on their own, you do some nice work.
Thanks, dude. I look a lot better. I look a lot better photoshopped, as you can see.
Well, it helps that you have good textured hair. I mean, Matt's been teasing me throughout this whole pandemic about my my changing hairdo. I'm surprised you didn't comment on it, because I usually rock a buzz cut, as you know.
I know.
And, I've had like several different hairdos during this whole thing, so.
I gotta pick and choose when I go after people's hair, since I don't have much. I pick and choose my battles there.
Sure, I respect it. I respect the COVID cut, man. The COVID cuts are nice. Let it grow out a little bit, show off what you got. I like it, dude.
Oh, cool, thanks. Yeah, that's what I figured. It got so long. I said I told my barber do something with this, and he gave me this weird transformer haircut. But you said you got some time to get back into MMA with everything that you're doing now. You contribute like me over at mymmanews.com, and I've read a few of the pieces you've done already. I mean, they're pretty deep, and like when you wrote that piece on Jim Miller, who fought not that long ago. You spent some time with Jim Miller. I mean, you got some stories from the road. I mean, your type of writing for the sport is hard to come by. I mean, considering you had such a great mentor, somebody that kind of influenced me too in Dwayne Finley. So, I mean, can you just talk about like what you notice now as far as, because you tweeted something not that long ago, and I chimed in with my own little doofus comment self promo thing. But like, what have you noticed changing now as like the way the sport's covered compared to when you were doing it?
For sure, man. I mean, I could go longer than this podcast runs on this, I think. But in short, the value of news aggregation has never been higher. I think people wait for somebody to break a story, or people wait for somebody to make an excellent point, and then they'll jump all over it, claim it as theirs, kind of parse it up however they want for their site. The idea of being creative and just digging in and owning a subject has disappeared, I feel like, since, and I'm not going to say it's because I left or anything, like, please don't get me wrong there. It's not because of that. It was headed that way when I was still working in MMA. Yeah. Absolutely. It's been a very slow climb, but where it's at now, it's the worst journalism has been. My tweet was about journalism in general, for the record, for anybody who didn't see it. It was not aimed at the MMA community. It was actually coming off after leaving DK Pittsburgh Sports. I was able to really step back and just look at the work everybody was doing, because when you work for a company and you're full time and you're just giving it all day in, day out, you kind of get tunnel vision at your own company. Like, I really only saw DK Pittsburgh Sports stuff, and I only knew what I was doing, my coworkers were doing. When I was able to step back and really look at the entire scope of the journalism landscape, I was like, dude, everybody's doing the same thing. Every site has the same stories. Everybody is pursuing the same little angles and quirks. Like, very few people are really going out there and producing truly original content. And that, like I said, that's been a trend since I was covering MMA before I left Flow Combat. That was definitely one thing I always prided ourselves at Flow Combat, was being very creative, original. I feel like we shot for the stars sometimes and completely missed, but I'll take that all day. You know, I'll take a story that only gets 500 reads, but we really believed in it. We tried it and we said, oh, all right, that one didn't work. Dust ourselves off and try it again, because the next one can hit for 20,000 views and you know, all the critical acclaim that you're after. So you just gotta, I don't know, man, I'm still learning as a writer and as a journalist and everything every day. So where I'm at right now, like you mentioned that Jim Miller piece, I wrote a piece on Gilbert Burns as well. Where I am right now is just writing stuff that means something to me, really as honestly as I can write. I'm done dealing with bias. Like, I don't even care about the idea of bias. If my writing comes off as biased, then that's how I truly felt about that guy. I'm sorry. I like Jim Miller. Spoiler alert, I like Jim Miller. It came off that way because that's actually how I feel about the dude. So it's the most honest thing I could have written. I mean, that's just where I am at this point. I think journalism's a lot of fake, man. As much as journalism wants to tout itself as this wholly unbiased source, it's anything but.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no, that's I appreciate the angle you're taking. I mean, I like I said, we've never really talked, but I've done some writing in the past. I've been going to MMA events for 20 plus years now. So I have a long history from no holds barred days on of attending events. So all my writing has always been from a fan's perspective. And I've never hid the fact that I'm a huge Chuck Liddell fan, or I'm a huge Fedor fan, or Tito Ortiz, or whoever the heck it is that I'm writing about. And there's always, I've had a hard time when I've gone to cover events in times, because the fan in me wants to come out, and it's like, it's hard not to root for that guy. So I appreciate you kind of doing that in a bigger forum, in a sense, because I think that's a lot of the history of the sport, is the fans that have come up and learning these fighters and knowing the fighters, and it really, them being such good guys that it makes it hard not to root for them on a personal level. That's a little comment on my part, but I guess my question, getting to Dana White earlier in the year took a little bit of heat when he mentioned that MMA writers and MMA media need to kind of watch themselves a little bit, because on the totem pole of sports writers and journalists, they're generally considered working their way up, but they're in the lower totem of that of the pole. Do you, when you started working doing the Pittsburgh stuff, the Steelers, did you notice a difference in levels of? I mean, I don't know exactly how to say it, but I think you're kind of picking up on what I'm saying. Is the professional level the same when you get to the top, or were you noticing that, like, you really do have another level when it gets to the Pirates or Major League writing or NFL writing, stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a really fun, interesting question, man, because this is something that I discuss with people quite a bit, is that I was actually amazed at how well MMA media prepared me to cover the Steelers, to cover the Pirates and things. And it's mostly the aggression of it. The way MMA media is, every piece of news that breaks, every little bit of analysis, you guys are always all over it. You guys know the ins and outs of the sport at every level. And that's the kind of like just well-rounded information and just attack mode that you need to have to really succeed at any level. But especially, you know, the pro major North American sports that I was covering definitely had that element. The one thing that is different, I will say, is like the journalism culture there, if that makes sense. For instance, I was constantly out getting beers with my MMA media guys and just shooting the shit and talking about things that aren't sports. Football media is not necessarily as friendly with each other. It's way more cutthroat. It's way more, I work for my guys, you work for your guys. We are competitors. We're not friends. It's way more like that, and it's just more cutthroat in that way. But overall, man, I mean, the skill level is about the same. It's just how it's applied. And of course, in NFL media, you've got guys who've been covering the Steelers, for instance, for 30 plus years. You can't replicate that kind of experience. You know, me coming in on my first year, I could still teach that guy some stuff. He could teach me way more. Like, I'm not shy about that. When you have that experience, there's just no replacement for that. But a fresh face will come up with new angles, will come up with different ways maybe to ask questions or to present ideas. So there's definitely a give and take with it. But the fundamentals of journalism, and I tell this to people all the time, like, you could send me out to cover marble racing, and I could do it. I could cover a horse race tomorrow. The fundamentals of journalism do not really change, and MMA media absolutely has a lot of that. Dana White's comment, dude, Dana White loves ruffling the feathers of media, and I think it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious when people get upset about it, for sure. I mean, I get what he's saying, and I get, like, it's viewed that way, but from somebody who has been in the MMA media and also NFL media, it's not that different, Dana. It really isn't, man. It's the same people.
That's funny. You know, what's funny is as you were talking about just the difference. I mean, I know it's really not that far away from MMA, but I have had to cover a couple of boxing events. I mean, if you remember when I met you, I was writing for Front Proof Media, which is a boxing heavy site, and I was the only MMA guy there. So anything that happened in New York, they were like, "Can you go?" And when I went in it was the Spence Algieri. I don't know if that was like one or two. But USS Sean Cunningham was so they sat us. They handled it completely different than anything that I've ever been to with anyone, because it was in a steakhouse, and when they ordered a steak and everything. It was pretty cool. But so they would sit like the boxer, his trainer, and they had tables with different media folks. That's how, so people would talk to him. So I was at Cunningham's table, and of course, you know, they're there to talk about training and the matchup and stuff like that. But he had a passion about writing his own comic book and his artwork and stuff like that. And, you know, I found that interesting. So I kept asking him questions about that. And like 30 minutes after he said whatever he had to say at the podium, we went outside and walked out of the steakhouse, and he and I were talking on Broadway about comic books and stuff like that. And I remember, like, he was saying, like, his dream was to have, like, you know, an idea of his made into a film, and that Batman Superman movie was being promoted at the time, and he pointed at that poster, and we just had we really connected, and we kept in touch for a little while after that. But I haven't spoken to him since he fought on that McGregor Mayweather undercard. But you know, it's just weird that you're talking about the difference in the dynamics, because that was one thing that I was like, wow, these guys aren't respecting what he seems passionate about. You know,
Yeah.
It's kind of, it was like they treated him like a commodity or something like that. And I don't know. I feel like athletes kind of like it when you show an interest in them as you know, not just some character on your screen.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I definitely noticed the same thing in the pro sports I was recently covering. I mean, that idea, I've always approached it this way, and this is absolutely something I picked up from Dwayne, as we were talking about earlier. Dwayne broke down a lot of barriers for me in terms of what bias is, how close you can get to your interview subjects, things of that nature, because he doesn't have a traditional journalism background. He's just a guy with a crazy knack for storytelling and for connecting with people. No journalism degree, no formal training, no nothing like that. Whereas I came in with kind of those fundamental J school, fundamentals. And that was tough. He had to kind of break those walls down for me and be like, hey man, like you can joke around with him if you want. You can be a little loose. You can have a beer with him. You can do these things. Mm-hmm. And I was like, are you sure? That's not in the handbook, Dwayne. But he like, I was reading his stories and I was like, dude, he's just crushing it. Like he's drilling right to the heart of who these guys are in the most real way possible. Like if that's not journalism, then I don't know what is, man. And to your point, like walking out of the press conference and just talking about comic books, something not even related to the sport, like that's huge. And I absolutely carried that into the Steelers locker rooms, Pirates locker rooms. Like I was talking to a Pirates pitcher, Joe Musgrove, very early in the year, just about coffee. We had a whole interview about coffee. It had nothing to do with baseball. And then after that, I come to learn that he's a huge UFC fan as well. So we talked about UFC. We would talk about MMA. And then every time I would see him, he'd be like, what's up, Joe? And I'd be able to get some good stuff from him. But the beauty of doing it that way is when Joe would have a bad game on the mound professionally, I could ask him the hard questions without him thinking I'm being a dick. He knows, like, I'm just out here doing my job. This is a guy I can trust, So that's how you kind of build that trust, that rapport. It's huge. When you take a personal interest in them, because I really do have a personal interest in them, man. These guys are the top, 0.1% athletes in the world. They're amazing people. Even the guys that barely make the team are amazing athletes, what they put themselves through. Same goes for MMA. If you're in the UFC, I care about you. If you're in LFA, I care about you. Bellator, any of the, if you're putting your body out there, training every day, I care about that grind, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So to keep piggybacking kind of off where my questions were going then, and off that, MMA has always been kind of praised by a lot of people that the fighters are accessible, at least up until kind of the McGregor era, and then it kind of started changing a little bit, maybe with the lack of expos. Kind of the UFC has kind of separated the fighters from fans a little bit more in the last 4 or 5 years than what it was for a decade and a half. Did you find that so them being accessible, especially when you were doing Flow Combat, I think, you had one of the bigger outlets at the time to get guys. When you started dealing with the MLB, the guy, you talk about the smallest guys in MLB and NFL are still millionaires for the most part. They're making a lot of money. It's a little different than the guy making 8,000 and 8,000 on an LFA card. Yeah. Did you find that they were still accessible? I know once you break that barrier, or was it harder to break barriers with those guys in the higher paying professional sports, or was it exactly the same for you?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a dual layer answer. So on one layer, I'll use just the Pirates as an example, or the Steelers. It's kind of the same idea. But the Pirates, for example, when they're in season, they're playing multiple times a week. So that's multiple times a week you get to be in the locker room with them and talk to them. So that's kind of your access period if you view it that way. Like every day they play is kind of a UFC media day or an MMA media day. If you want to look at it that way, you have the opportunity to go up to them and talk on every game day, before and after the game. So you have to make the most of that time for sure. For the Steelers, football playing once a week, every practice during the week, you're allowed in the locker room right after practice for like 45 minutes. So that's your time. That's your access period for football. So as far as getting them outside of the facilities, though, it doesn't happen. They're much more protected than MMA. Like, for instance, just now I saw Steve Mowry was pulled from this upcoming Bellator card because he tested positive for COVID. I shot him yeah, dude, it sucks. He's being super positive about it, though. It's awesome. But he's feeling no effects. He actually thought he was fine, but nope. So he's gone. Somebody replaced him. I forget the name. But yeah. But like I texted him right away and talked to him about it. Just one-on-one. Just texted him, expressed my condolences. Like, that sucks, man. Hope you can get back out there soon. We talked about it a little bit. So that's something that, like, with the Steelers, at least with 1 year of experience, I wasn't at that level with guys. I did have some luck getting one-on-one stuff outside of the facility with a couple of the Steelers rookies, because I made it a point for the rookies when they were coming in to really show interest in them, tell their stories, make sure I interviewed all the new faces, all the new guys. And then that did carry throughout the season. And then in the off season, I was able to hit them up, DM them, and arrange some interviews. But and honestly, the Steelers, I don't think care for that very much. I don't think they like when you do that, which I didn't know, but I learned.
That's how you learn, right?
Yeah. Hey man, I'm going to be aggressive with it. Like this, like I said, for me, that's what it's all about. I just want to talk to the fighters. I want to tell your story. I want to tell the players' stories. I'm a very personable, I guess, journalist, however you want to call it, a person-centric writer. So that's always the stories that I'm going to go with. So if I get slapped on the wrist a couple times, that's fine. I never make the same mistake twice. That's what I like to say. So.
Well, you're also, I mean, you've always, I mean, since I've met you, you've always been a super positive and supportive dude. Even when you're asking hard questions, I remember you shared the video. It was some executive. I don't know if it was football or baseball because I don't really follow them sports, but I remember it was somebody was getting a little heated with the questions you were asking, but you managed to keep the tone friendly and positive that the person still kind of in their own asshole butthurt way answered your question, because it was like, this guy's not really being an asshole. He's just asking something I really don't want to answer. You know,
and that's the key, man. That's where the rapport comes in handy. Like I was saying about Joe Musgrove. Like if I had to ask him a hard question, which I really don't remember him ever having a terrible game that I had to, but if I did, it would be like that. It'd be like, man, I'm annoyed right now. We just lost, whatever, but I respect it. And that's kind of that's the approach that I always love to take. But it's funny too. I remember exactly the video you're talking about. It's funny, man. I only had one case, and this ties into the discussion perfectly. One time in my life, I had a question completely shut down. The dude just refused to shut it and kind of like gave me a little on the end. Like it kind of made me feel bad about it. You know, like why would you even ask that, dude? And it was when I went to the away locker room to talk to their manager about something. It was the Reds and Pirates, and they had big beef throughout the season. Like there was a huge brawl between the two teams. It was the first time they played since the brawl. So I wanted to get the other side, the Red side of the story, and talk to their manager. And I asked them about it, and their PR guy just shut me down. He's like, we're not taking any more questions on that. And I was like, all right, cool, man. That's cool. But again, the rapport, I don't have rapport with the away team. That's the first time I ever saw this dude. So you've got the home team guy coming in asking these tough questions. Now it's a no-go.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely it was definitely interesting, but again, the way you handled it just shows your time in coming from a sport like MMA. You know, you got a thick skin off of from the experience you already had.
It's true, man.
Then you're back in the MMA mix. You're breaking the Steve Mowry news. When I had Tapology up and it still had him fighting, and I clicked refresh, and now it's got him removed from the card. So
see that we're breaking news on a private stream.
Before we get into the MMA stuff, I just a quick comment about Pittsburgh. And I before, kind of during the Lesnar era when UFC got really expensive, I used to travel around being a huge San Diego Charger fan. No longer an LA Charger fan. But when they were San Diego, I used to kind of travel with the team, and I've been to about a dozen cities or so. Went to road games during the LT, during their prime.
Nice.
Getting as close to a championships as San Diego ever got
Sure.
run. But went to Pittsburgh. I got to say, best city of fans I ever went to. Fans buying beers for us, treated us like we were family, despite being geared out in Charger gear and being as loud and as obnoxious as anybody. The Pittsburgh fans were the classiest fans that I ran into across the country. And to this day, I know we talked to Nolan King about Krispy Kreme. I need to get back to Pittsburgh and get Primanti's.
Aye, there you go.
If I can get a Primanti sandwich again in my lifetime, then I can die happy.
You had one? You had one?
I had one. That was one of our stops.
There you go. That's good stuff, man. I'm happy to hear. I'm happy to hear about the fans too. That's killer. I mean, I tell people this all the time, but unless you visited Pittsburgh like you have, or especially if you were born and raised here, it's hard to understand the way sports are in the fabric of everything we do. I mean, it's not even like there's no division between sports and life. It's literally a part of the fabric here. It's very unique.
And I think that's why we got such respect, because initially it was kind of like, oh, boo Chargers, you suck. The minute you sit down and talk to somebody and you say you flew 5 hours to get to the game, you're staying at the team hotel, all of a sudden it's like, okay, you're one of us, because, Pittsburgh, for Ed doesn't know, but the Pittsburgh fans or Steeler fans are known for they're known as one of the biggest traveling squads in the country. They go to city to city. They have their whole little nation that that goes around to all the games. So once that happened, but just wanted to throw that in there, a little respect for the Pittsburgh fans. It's been probably almost 10 years now, but I'd love to get back there. And
well, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me because I mean, Hunter's the only guy I know from out there. And before I met him, we were kind of like friendly on Twitter, and we talked beer and stuff before that. And then when we finally got together and we chowed down and messed up a whole plate of nachos and God knows what else. I remember we ate a lot. And then like we were saying before we started recording, like, I mean, very few people I respect their beer game, but Hunter's one of them, man. I mean, he and I are definitely. I mean, didn't you do some stuff with DK Sports at some dope ass bar that I feel like I need to go to?
Yeah, man, that was sick. When you guys come in together, we'll go to Permani's and then we'll finish up the night at Mike's Beer Bar, so we can hit both. But it was sweet, man. We had a weekly show that was filmed at this local beer bar. They have 80 beers on tap. They have 500 beers. So plenty of your Belgian beers, dude. They got plenty of triples and quads for you, dude. Guaranteed. So we can take care of you at Mike's Beer Bar. But we had a show where we would drink a flight. Excuse me. And between beers, we would talk about different segments. So each beer would be a different topic.
I watched one of those and I just got thirsty watching it.
Same, dude. I got thirsty making them. So that
yeah, see, that's enough for nothing. I feel like that right there. You don't got to be on ESPN or anything like that. You do something like that, you made it, as far as I'm concerned.
That's winning, dude. Once a week, I literally got paid to drink beer. If that's not the dream, I don't know what is, guys.
Yeah. That's as good as it gets.
All right.
With that said, yeah, you mentioned Steve Mowry. This week, Ed and I have been talking about Bellator. And I had been concerned for the last couple months that it was quiet. Well, about a week ago, 10 days ago, all of a sudden we got announced that they're coming back. So snap of a finger, this Friday night, we get Bellator returning for their return show. Doing it the Mohegan Sun? Is that?
Yeah.
Yes, Mohegan Sun.
For the next 4 events.
So they're kind of setting up their Fight Island in Connecticut. Which is about as much of an island as Yas Island is too, but we won't get too deep on that.
That's why they're calling it a sphere, not an island.
But pretty good card. Nice little headliner: Sergio Pettis, Ricky Bandejas, some of the other names. Jordan Main makes his his Bellator. I believe it's his Bellator debut. I don't know if he fought in one of the earlier Bellators. I should probably go back and check that. But after fighting in Strikeforce, fighting in UFC, he gets to Bellator. Taiwan Claxton against the undefeated J.J. Wilson. And Aaron Pico, one of the guys we've talked about. We've basically had this show since he started his career, so we've been up and down with him. I guess I'll kind of just ask a question off that, Hunter. What's your opinion of Pico? After he got knocked out a couple times, I was kind of on the side of like, let's sit this young guy out for a couple years, maybe do some wrestling, maybe do some combat jiu-jitsu or something. But he got a knockout win in his last win. What somebody who's covered the sport and seen everybody that's been around it, what is your opinion of Pico?
Yeah, we were at that was one of the times I met you, Ed, for sure, at Bellator NYC. So we were at Pico's debut and everything. I remember the hype for that event was just so absurd. For Pico especially, the way everybody was touting him as the next champion, maybe 2 division champion even, right from the jump. The expectations, in retrospect, it's really easy to say how unrealistic they were. And now in retrospect, it's also easy to say how much pressure was on the poor guy coming in. That was super unfair, the attention and everything he was getting. At the time, it seemed justified, but now it's really easy to use some hindsight and be like, man, we probably pushed that dude a little too hard, too fast. But like you said, he's still knocking dudes out. The talent is undeniable, honestly. What he has is still there. But chaining it all together in MMA is such a different beast. And I think that's what he really had to learn. He had all these great individual parts. It was like he had an engine, he had tires, he had suspension, but the car wasn't built yet. And he had to learn how to do that. So once he starts putting that together, I think he's going to be fine. I think he's on that track now. I'm not sure if he is going to be a champion or what he's going to be exactly, but you don't want to get hit by that dude. I guarantee you that. I still love Aaron Pico, and I'm really interested in his trajectory for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's so young. That's the thing that every time, one thing about him is his youth. you don't want to see him take too much bad damage so early in his career, so that he can have a long career. But it's definitely one of those things. I remember, like you said, it was that event that you and I hung out before that event that night before. But I know you and Dwayne actually talked to him after the loss, and one of the things, I mean, we keep calling him this kid and stuff like that, but he's so mature the way he handles things. My only concern with him is that I feel like sometimes this can be said for all wrestlers too, guys that come into MMA from wrestling, their competitive spirit is kind of like always on another level, in comparison to other guys coming into the sport, because, they're willing to sacrifice so much. It's like that somebody has to, their coach or whomever is in their team has to be the ones to reel them back, to kind of like make them, not there's this, one of the guys I trained with came from wrestling, and he compared wrestling and jiu-jitsu. He was like, wrestling is like two rams just going at each other until somebody knocks each other out. Right. And like jiu-jitsu kind of has like, okay, you don't have to win them all. Sometimes you learn through being, soft is hard and smooth is fast and things like that. So I just feel like that's something that Pico has to pick up with time.
Yeah, he's going to have to. I mean, I think you'll see it as he gets older. We see it with a lot of guys, right? When they're young and they think they're invincible and everything. I think we just saw it with Cody Garbrandt in his last fight. Pico reminded me of Garbrandt a lot in that dual kind of wrestling and heavy hands, but like actual amateur boxing background. They reminded me of each other quite a bit. And then you see Garbrandt starts, forgetting those fundamentals, gets caught a couple times, gets knocked out a couple times. His last fight, though, he looked super polished again, very relaxed, very calm, and obviously he scored a huge knockout. So I think if Pico can just tame that side of him, like you're saying, if he can avoid being a ram all the time and just play it a little smarter, a little more tactically, I think he'll be totally fine. I mean, it's not like he's getting completely outclassed out there. He's getting caught. Every fight he's lost, he gets caught. You just need to stop it.
Yeah. You just reminded me that one time you were like, well, with Khabib, why don't people just get up when they take some down? He was like, why don't they just get up?
They need to train with Derek Lewis and learn how to stand up. That's all you got to do is stand up.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ed.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, I pretty much same page then with Pico. I've actually seen, it's one of those guys I look back, I've seen him fight 6 times already live, which is insane because, it makes me wonder if he'd be one of the guys I'd see fight, 30 times in their career or something. But it sucks now that he's got a couple losses, because I feel like I'm watching the fights like, I'm rooting for him because you want to see him kick ass. But at the same time, you want to watch a fight, and it's like, God damn, if he gets caught again, is this going to be it? And, and it really won't be, but there's not many guys that young that we've kind of, you don't want to say grown up with, but you feel like the guy because you watched him since his first fight at the upper levels, and it just sucks to see him dominating a fight and then get caught, and you just don't know how many of those you get. So, we're all rooting for Pico. Card looks exciting. Another thing that jumps out this Friday that a lot of people, it's flying under the radar, not as big as Bellator or UFC, but BKFC, Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, kicks back this Friday night.
That's right. I forgot they were back.
Yeah, so we got Luis Palomino, a stud. Anybody who watched World Series of Fighting and watched Justin Gaethje, can't watch Justin Gaethje without watching the Palomino fights. He fights a UFC veteran, Isaac Valley Flag, who's made a name for himself.
Nice. It's a big good fight
in BKFC. So, I mean, it's one of the better, main events that they've had, probably without necessarily the name recognition of a Lobov or a Malignaggi or, some of the other guys that they've picked, the Gonzagas and Bigfoots and stuff like that. But,
dude, you got me super hyped just mentioning that fight. Like, if you've watched fights, if you go back, that's a war waiting to happen right there. And in bare knuckle, that's going to be a crazy fight. Give me that over Artem versus Paulie all day.
That's the thing with Palomino. I mean, Palomino's had probably, without looking roughly, it seems like he's had about 50 fights. I mean, he's been around forever, but he just kind of never broke that ceiling to become a superstar. But he's always the guy who is like, he's the guy nobody wants to fight, and he beats everybody. And then he, in World Series of Fighting, he ran into Gaethje twice, which. Yeah,
and he gave him, that was like their fight of the year or whatever when they fought that first time. It was probably his toughest fight there when he was in WSOF. Gaethje's toughest fight there, yeah.
So that's another one Friday night, and this one's not pay-per-view. This one's actually free on YouTube, according to everything I'm seeing.
Ooh.
So Friday night you got the Bellator prelims on YouTube, and I believe also on their app. And then the main card is on Paramount Network. And then as for everything I've read and seen, the BKFC card, the entire card is free on YouTube. So
nice.
So Friday kicks off, and then Saturday we got a hell of a UFC card to wrap
Wait.
the.
I'm gonna bring that up. So Hunter, just so you know, Matt likes to bring up the Tapology because of the running gag when we look at UFC cards on this podcast is that the inaccuracies on their website.
Okay,
yeah. We learned last week that Paige Van Zandt was cutting down from 155 pounds. So we're
yeah.
put on that COVID-19, right? She blew it up.
the COVID 50 for her.
Yeah.
But so huge card. See if we can get it to pop up. There it is. Whittaker Till main event. Darren Till back up at 185, coming off a win over Kevin Gastelum. Robert Whittaker.
This is your speed right here.
I know those guys.
There we go. Yeah. No, we're gonna stick with most of the names. An interesting stat: there are 15 fights on this card right now, currently scheduled. Before we eventually get our fight cancellation weigh-in day, is currently tied to match the most UFC fights ever on a card with 15. That was UFC 2. UFC 2 had 15 fights, but that was also a 16-man tournament that created that. So currently stated to be the long, and considering UFC 2 had no fights go past like 9 minutes, this card is set to be the longest card in UFC history as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so ton of guys. Let's see. Edge went all the way down to the bottom. The fights that jump out to me, of course, names that we all should recognize.
Yeah.
Go down a little farther, Ed. Next fight down. Fabricio Verdun, Alexander Gustafson making his heavyweight debut. Usually you see guys kind of jump up to heavyweight and maybe kind of test the water. Gustafson ain't doing that. He is, although Verdun's not the Verdun that we kind of got used to maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Hell of a challenge for Gustafson, and a fight that really would put Gustafson right in the mix at heavyweight if he were to pick up a good win. Barring it not being some boring decision or something, he's going to get right in the mix. So I guess I'll ask Hunter, did you ever think you'd see this matchup?
No, definitely not. It's an awesome matchup, though, man. I mean, I watched Verdun's last fight, actually, and he was extremely hittable. He looked very slow. He was very hittable. As far as Gustafson going up to heavyweight and trying to make a splash, I feel like this is an awesome opportunity to do that. I think this is a great matchup for Gus to kind of show what he can do. And we've seen dudes move up in weight and perform better. I mean, Darren Till being even Whittaker. Till and Whittaker both did it. So you see guys move up in weight and sometimes perform better. So I see no reason why Gustafson can't do the same. Like I said, that Verdun matchup looks really juicy for him. I'm not a betting guy. I learned early on not to bet, especially on MMA, but I would definitely throw down some money on a Gustafson finish in this one.
I might do that.
Yeah. It's interesting because most people don't survive on the ground once if Verdun gets them down and gets on top of them. The last time we saw Gustafson was against Jones, and although Jones did beat him up a little, really the fight turned when Jones got him down on the ground, and that was Gustafson's weakness. And without going back, I kind of feel like that was the same situation with Anthony Smith a little bit. I'd have to rewatch that one, but yeah, man. I mean, I just think it's a cool fight. It's kind of a clash of styles in a sense,
Very much.
And it's open weight. I mean, they're going to say it's heavyweight, but this is kind of what the UFC was built on. Here was dudes just fighting. Anybody over 185 pounds essentially fighting each other. So I love it. I don't necessarily know who to pick. I think Gustafson they're both kind of in a must-win situation in a sense. I mean, Gustafson can always just kind of write it off and go, hey, I tested the water. If I want to go back to 205, he gets right back in the mix. Verdun's basically a loss away from maybe fighting Fedor again in a retirement match.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I just love the matchup. I love the creativity. Ed and I have talked about how this Fight Island and COVID has created some of these wild matchups. And without going down the list, I think this might be my favorite one that just kind of popped up for two, legends of the UFC and legends of MMA, really. So look forward to it. Ed, do you have any kind of take on that fight? I don't know if you've looked into it much, but
I mean, no, I usually look into when we're looking at cards. I usually when we do it on the podcast, it's usually my first look. If I'm not writing anything about it, and I mean, there's actually, the whole card. There's some stuff. I went down to the prelims because I know there's a few fights on there that they just added not too long ago that I'm really interested in. But as far as this particular fight, it's one of those things. Like, obviously, if they stay standing, I could see Gustafson pulling off a decision win. But Hunter makes a good point with the putting some money down on if he gets a knockout. But I don't know why. I'm just looking at the stats here. I'm pretty sure Fabricio Werdum has some wins by submission. I don't know why. I don't know why it says 0%. But
oh yeah, there we go.
But we just scrolled through the card quickly, Hunter, and I know we were talking about, you might not know the names, but these are some names I'm sure you recognize from your
there you go.
Jumping in real quick, we're talking about the betting odds. According to Tapology right now, they show Gustafson as a -300 favorite.
Wow.
Yeah,
maybe sense. Maybe I won't throw money on. There's not a lot of value there that everybody.
No, Werdum at +230 is actually the value, honestly.
Yeah, no doubt.
On that one, but that obviously could change.
Unless that method of victory prop though is on,
True.
Yeah, I don't know about all the props. I wonder how I'd be curious to talk to a sports bet guy and find out how with Vegas.
Like Yanni the Greek.
Yeah, well, no, maybe not Yanni the Greek, but somebody who could maybe break down if the closing of Vegas and Atlantic City has thrown off the sports betting. I mean, do we not see? I wonder if the lines are moving or if they're staying a lot more stagnant.
That's a good question.
With the lack of money coming in person at these places, so that could be something to keep an eye on for bettors. If a line opens up crazy, you might have extra time to get on it than you would have in the past. That brings us then to the co-main event here. Two fighters that I love, Hua Mauricio Shogun, one of the all-time legends, top 5 light heavyweight of all time, I think is pretty unanimous, against Little Nog, Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, who Pride legend, hasn't had much success in the UFC, kind of came over, kind of a beaten version of what we had gotten used to in Japan. Third time they fought, Hua 2-0. The last time they fought, if I'm just thinking off top, I believe it was the Ronda Rousey Correa card, UFC 193, I want to say. And it wasn't a very great fight. So not one necessarily to watch. Their first fight was one of the greatest fights in MMA history, in the Pride Grand Prix. I don't know. I got to go with Hua. Nogueira hasn't done anything to really make me feel like he can win this fight. Shogun's had a couple nice runs in the UFC, and then he gets brutalized in a fight, which kind of knocks him back down. Two older guys. Jokingly, I said, if this isn't the retirement fight, then we got to get Golden Boy back so we can do Shogun Little Nog 4 in Golden Boy
no.
to keep the tradition alive. But I don't know. I go with Hua. Personally, I hope it's a draw with both guys just beating the hell out of each other.
Nice. It won't be as bad as Liddell Ortiz, whatever, part 10 that was in Golden Boy. Oh, my God. That was tough to watch. This actually, man, like I dug into this fight a little bit before we got on air just to refresh my memory. I forgot the run that Shogun was on until recently. He's something like 4-1-1 in his last 6. Like I forgot that there was a time recently where Shogun was putting himself back in the title conversation, which seems impossible. In my mind, I'm like, there's no way that happened. But then you look at the run, it's like, well, sure enough, he won 3 in a row. So, and then fought Anthony Smith and lost. So it was right there. But it's funny that he was right there. And Little Nog 2, not as bad as I remembered recently. He's 2-2 in his last 4. So neither guy is completely done, I don't think. Like I had in my mind, this was going to be one of those sad, like we just said, like Chuck versus Tito kind of fights. But I don't think it's going to be that, man. I think it's actually going to be really fun. Like you said, obviously they have a history together, even though it's not necessarily a rubber match since the series is 2-0 already. But it's going to be a fun fight, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be fun too. I mean, I'm always on and off about Shogun because it seems like when he's on fire, he's on fire, but it usually takes like one like elbow or something that'll like break his nose or cut him really bad, and then that'll set the downslide for him to get a loss. So it's almost like a coin toss, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean,
it really is.
These guys, and we, I jokingly, kind of saying that they've reached the end of their run for the most part, but these guys never fight easy competition. So when you see like a guy go a 2-2 out of one of these guys is about as impressive as a 4-0 out of a lot of the other guys who are not fighting. I mean, if you look at Hua's list of fighters he's fought, I mean,
ridiculous.
It's just insane that. Now, I mean, we haven't heard a lot from Tyson Pedro lately, but when Hua fought him, he was kind of the hot ticket, and everybody thought he was going to win, and Hua, ended that quote unquote hype train, I guess. We'll see what happens with Pedro in the future, but and then Nogueira, I mean, just fight. None of these guys have turned down a fight in their life, so
right.
I mean, this is. In a sense, it's sad for the old school MMA fans because this is the guys that got us into the sport, and these are the guys that this is the reason guys make money today is because of the blood and the sweat that these guys left in the mat.
Which one of the Nogueira brothers, the one that did the anaconda choke on Heath Herring? Is it this one or is
no,
the other one?
That was
older one.
Rodrigo.
Yeah, that was the first time I had seen an anaconda choke, and then we saw like 10 last weekend.
Yeah,
or last week.
Yeah. But, let me throw this out there on that fight. I think something that we could see is a grappling matchup. I would love to see them hit the ground and see what they can do with each other on the ground. People forget how good of a grappler I think Shogun is and how he's always based his game around that. He just started knocking dudes out, and sometimes that becomes more appealing. Obviously, his Muay Thai is very strong. But I can see this turning into a grappling match and a very fun one at that.
Their first fight, I mean, it's been – 16 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like there was a lot of ground action. Again, I recommend that fight for anybody to go back. In fact, I should go back and rewatch that.
Maybe they'll make a gentleman's agreement and be like, yo, let's just grapple this time.
The funny thing about Hua is, though, Hua basically, he came from shoot a box, but his base really was grappling and was kind of jiu-jitsu coming up. I didn't notice it until I read it today. I didn't realize that the only submission on his record is from Pride 32 when he knee-barred Kevin Randleman.
Wow.
So you would think of somebody with as many fights as he's had, you would think he would have more. I mean, usually somebody picks up a rear naked choke or something along the way, but
that's crazy.
He's kind of used his grappling just to end up beating somebody down and kneeing them in the face when they try to get up off the ground. So
absolutely.
Great, fun fight. When it's the older guys, like I said, I hope they beat the hell out of each other, but I hope neither of them suffer, any kind of catastrophic injury that some older fighters can face. That brings us to the main event: Robert Whittaker, Darren Till. Fun fight. It's weird, Whittaker had so many fights canceled, and he had his personal family issues that slowed down some of his stuff. And, he's really become a fan favorite for a lot of people. And then he gets absolutely blasted by Adesanya in his last bout. But that's proven to not really be that's proven to not be a fluke in any sense of it. Adesanya's proven to become one of the future stars, if not current huge mega stars in UFC.
And Darren Till's a star on social media.
Darren Till is picked up on social media. He's got he's got a continent behind him. Both these guys do. For me, I tend to lean towards Whittaker. I just feel like he's the more complete fighter. But I've talked about it in the past when I know he lost to Wonder Boy, but it was kind of more of not a flash knockdown, but it was like a 40-second fight when they fought. I believe that was at UFC 170. His fight with Adesanya was more of butt kicking, one that you got to kind of recover from. So we had talk about it all the time. You can find out who the true champions are, how they rebound from basically getting your ass kicked, because it tends to happen to everybody at least once. So I'm curious to see how he bounces back. I will take Whittaker by decision win. I know that's 5 rounds, but I think he is just the better overall, well-rounded mixed martial artist. And I got to see how Till continues to adjust at 185 and kind of how his body fills out. Although both of these guys are up from 170, Whittaker was in the cage with Romero twice, so I don't think there's any question that he can body up with anybody. So I'll take Whittaker by decision. What do you say, Hunter?
Yeah, I fall on those Romero fights too that you just mentioned there at the end. I think those, more than any fights for me, stick out for Robert Whittaker. And the case can be made, of course, that Romero won, or you can have your doubts of who won those fights. But what was shown in those fights was Whittaker's champion spirit and his well-roundedness, his ability to not just fall victim to Romero's power and explosiveness in wrestling and all these things. He showed how well-rounded he is and how he can dog out a fight if he has to. Like you said, Adesanya kind of tooled him up, but Adesanya's been doing that to everybody. So there's not a lot of shame in that. I mean, I like Whittaker's game a lot. All of his losses, like you said, are kind of explainable. You can say, well, it was this guy. He got caught by Wonder Boy. No shame in that at all. Darren Till, on the other hand, like you were just saying, how you view somebody's championship spirit by how they rebound from losses. Darren Till gets completely obliterated by Tyron Woodley, like one of the worst butt kickings. I don't know if we can curse. Butt kickings.
Yeah, go ahead.
That I've ever seen in the UFC. First off, Woodley drops him with a punch and then just toys with him on the ground before choking him out. And then Masvidal puts him completely to sleep after that. And Till bounces back by going up in weight and gutting out a win over Gastelum. Not the most fun fight of all time, I'll give you that. But Kelvin Gastelum's no slouch, man. Like that, no. He's a beast, and especially on the feet. If you want to keep it on the feet with Kelvin Gastelum, you're probably going to catch those hands at some point. Even Izzy found that out. Gastelum fought Adesanya as well as anybody to date.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Gastelum's a beast, man. And for Darren Till to outpoint him, to show that he could last with him, I think – Till's got some momentum at 185 in my eyes. If you showed me this matchup a year ago, I'd be like, dude, Whittaker is going to obliterate him. But just the way that things have changed since then, I think it's a very close matchup. I mean, I still favor Whittaker just like you, Matt. I think a Whittaker decision is a very smart pick here. That's what I would ultimately go with. But a Till victory, whether it be a TKO or a decision, is certainly not going to surprise me.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much on the same page as you, Hunter. Only because it's hard to pick against Whittaker because he's a former champion, and Till's still making his way at the new with the new numbers and stuff. So, we talked about Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, I know he got submitted just last weekend, but that was that guy. The leg lock game is like a separate. It's like a whole other martial art, and Gastelum actually was doing some things right in that fight, but so was Hermanson when you go for that type of leg lock. So it's like that's what happens. But the thing about Gastelum said about that Adesanya fight, that he laid out the blueprint to beat Adesanya, and I firmly believe that. Anyway, for this fight, I'm leaning towards Whittaker, but I'm not going to be shocked if Till gets more popular after the weekend. So
no, I mean, it should be a heck of a fight. This whole card, we only did the top few five.
Yeah.
Like I said, 15 deep, lots of names. Cowboy Oliveira, always exciting.
It's weird. They have his image down here, but they don't have him up here.
List it on the main
Khamzat Chimaev. That's that guy. He only fought on that Wednesday card, and they got him. He said he wanted to fight another fight on Fight Island, and this is it. I had heard they were booking this, and this is the guy that got that first round victory over John Phillips, I think was his opponent, where he second round victory where he kind of just mauled him for the first round, and then Darce choked him in the second round. I mean, this guy's going to be a problem.
That turnaround is ridiculous. If he pulls this off, that's going to be incredible. But everything I've seen, he's a guy. I've seen his name popping up all over the place on Twitter. He's got a lot of hype behind him. That's a super exciting prospect for sure, man. This whole card, it really is a good card, man. I'm pretty pumped actually to fire this one up.
Yeah, the Esparza Rodriguez fight is kind of a number one contender fight.
Yep.
So that's a big fight in the female divisions.
And then,
Exciting fights. So I mean, the UFC's really been on a sweet little roll right now. We didn't talk about the past event, but we got about a couple more minutes here. Just want to let everybody know Delvison Figueiredo beat Joseph Benavidez again, so he is now officially the flyweight champion, the first one in UFC since Cejudo vacated the title.
Betch Correa's on this card for this weekend too.
No,
she's always fun.
No, there's a lot. You know,
here's the one I was looking for. John Castaneda was he was like a title contender over at Combate Americas, fought on Contender Series too. So I was actually happy to see that they tapped him to come fight there.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the opening bout right there. You got two guys with experience fighting each other. So, I mean, like I said, get comfortable because 15 fights, 5-round main event could be a long night of action. But
what's on tap for you when you watch the fights, Hunter?
Ooh, man. Definitely some good food. Obviously, I'm always trying to cook up some good food. But as far as brews, I've been sipping one on this broadcast. It's a Brew Gentleman. Ooh, there we go. Brew Gentleman General Braddock's IPA, man. It's a local brewery here in Pittsburgh. They absolutely crush it. It's my favorite beer.
Wow, I actually feel really stupid that I didn't think to crack open a beer on this thing.
It's that experience, man. That's what you learn. That's what you learn.
When you get to the big time, Ed.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh shit. Well, it's been great having you on, Hunter. Been a pleasure meeting you. Why don't you go ahead and plug your website again and any of your social media and anything you want to plug in the next minute or two here?
Sure. The website is homistek.com. It's HOMISTEK.com. And then all of my social is at Hunter A. Homistek. Instagram and Twitter, I'm most active there. That's pretty much where you can find me. It's awesome, man. I'm loving this new thing I got going, this new little project brand I'm building. It's been really rewarding, giving me time, like I said, to fall back into MMA because I did fall out of the sport for a long time covering just the Pittsburgh sports and everything. So it's cool to be back. Thank you guys for having me. It's been a blast. Hopefully we can do it again, and you can bring a beer next time, Ed.
Yeah, I got so many just right behind me. And when I thought that was like an energy drink or something you were drinking because the shape of the can. And I know
it's one of those little skinny like White Claw cans. Still 12 ounces, but it makes you feel skinnier drinking it. I like it.
Yeah.
Nice.
We need to do. I mean, we are technically co-workers at My MMA News. If Eric ever needs a Northeastern event covered, maybe we cover it like on a Friday, Saturday, and
let's do it.
Do an old time sake meetup somewhere.
That'd be fun. You'll learn about the main event fighters' comic book addiction and favorite pizza toppings. You have no idea what happened in the fight, but we got you covered on the fight.
Awesome. Well, fans can check out the podcast at allaccessmma.com. Check us out on Twitter at Combat Hour, Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow me, Matthew Hawkins, on Twitter and Instagram at MMAHawk21. Follow Ed Carbajal at Carbazal on Twitter, Carbeerzal on Instagram. Enjoy your weekend, guys. Enjoy bare knuckle Bellator and 15 UFC fights on Saturday. It's this is what we love, and I can't wait.
Peace.
Have a good one, guys.
Later, man. Thanks for having me again. That was killer.
No problem.